Hello, and we are live. I'm really excited to welcome today Scott Alexander, who is the CEO of Jairus Marketing, and which is a fractional marketing department for innovators in the healthcare space. And we are going to be talking about marketing, all things marketing in the healthcare space and beyond. And so I'm going to actually turn it over to you, Scott, and ask you what's on your mind.
Well, I'm thinking about what's for dinner tonight, and I'm just kidding. On the marketing side, I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about kind of the age of marketing that we're in, specifically around the role of education as sort of sales and sort of where we are from that perspective. So, I don't know. To me, that idea of like the hardcore, like used car salesman, like what's it going to take for you to buy a widget today thing, I think it's long gone. And it's really more about how do you go about educating your potential consumers into engaging with you, and a lot of times outside of like a one-to-one conversation. So that's really
I have a question on this subject, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very strong premise in something like tech, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But how does it play out in healthcare? And who do you educate, and how do you educate vis-a-vis guidelines and vis-a-vis doctors and all the regulatory that plays out in our wonderful world of health?
Yeah. So years ago, I ran a group called Commercial Innovations for a division of Medtronic, which is a big medical device manufacturer. And by background, I'm an innovation guy, like, new products and all kind of jazz. And they had my team look at like the buying process. And we came back into a boardroom, and after we had been out, and this was like the first big report out that we had. And they asked me, like, Scott, what are some of the key insights that you've gleaned out of this? Like, at this point, it'd be like 3 months. Like, what have you learned? And I feel dumb saying it, but I was like, one of the biggest things is doctors are people too. And we think about healthcare as being that radically different. And like somebody goes through med school and then they lose their first name, they get a new one called doctor, and like they become these automatons. And it's like, that's not reality at all.
Right.
The truth of the matter is they want to learn about their craft. They want to get better. Just like people that are watching this right now want to learn how to get better in their professional setting. Doctors are the same way.
So they're going to make decisions based on ultimately on some emotional connection to your product just as much as anybody else, I assume, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also with like the anticipated outcomes that they're going to get. And so as we think about it, it's like many other B2B environments. It's just that there's regulatory because we got people's health and well-being involved. We have more folks, like there's a higher level of scrutiny on decisions that are made, but you're still going to have the same kinds of buying decisions that happen if you're selling widgets of some other type. It's just, there's the human body involved. And so that adds curveballs to it.
Right. One of the interesting things as you're talking about this is where this podcast actually came from, which was a discussion that we were having probably back in, I don't know, I guess November-ish of last year about the fact that small companies and startups and so forth tend to not like the word marketing because it's sort of like, I don't know what that is. I know I should be doing it. It seems like a giant waste of money and whatever. So we started talking about this idea of enabling business development and so forth. But ultimately what that is about is exactly what you're talking about, which is you have to make human connections and you have to be sort of reacting to and solving pain points for people, or there will not, or they won't buy your product. I'm sure you run into this with, you're marketing your own business, but also marketing your clients' businesses as well.
Exactly. And Jeff, I kind of feel like it's not about sales and marketing. Like I grew up in more of a marketing role, was in sales, but like we have this false dichotomy of like, you've got sales and you got marketing and they yell at each other and think they both, are not doing their job. And the truth of the matter is, if you're a buyer, and we all do this, right? If let's say we're buying a car, like you don't delineate what's coming from the marketing department of, Toyota versus what's coming from the sales people at Toyota. Like you just think about the buying process.
Right.
And so I think, as we're in this new world that we're in, buyers don't really care. So what they want is they want to be able to get the information they need to be able to make a good informed decision. And if that comes from a person, great. If that comes from me going to your website, great. But that's what they expect. And so, to me, it's like, it's not about marketing or sales. It's more about the commercial strategy. And that's where we're going. But I don't know. What are you guys seeing?
So my thought as you're speaking was about this education piece. And one of the things that strikes me, having, been working on my own company in biotech space, is like, it's just really hard to explain technology and scientific ideas to people in an elevator pitch. Like, that is not an easy thing. And so I guess my question for you is, how do you think about, and how do you advise your clients to handle that sort of problematic, when often, at least in the drug discovery space that I'm in, it's like we're all nerdy scientists, so we love getting into the weeds. It's like what we do. It's like, how do you work with your clients to kind of strike that balance where you want credibility and education, but not sort of an overwhelming, like, I don't even know what to do with what you're saying right now.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think it starts with, it's not about the technology, right? It's about what are you doing for the customer, right?
It's the problem, right?
It's like, what's the problem you're solving? And then once you get people to say, yeah, that problem is worth solving, then you can start to get into a level of depth of like, here's how this molecule interacts with that. Like, but far too often we get enamored with like, hey, look how great this pen is. Let me tell you about it. As opposed to saying like, what are you trying to do, Eric? Like, how was that work? And then it builds on itself. The other thing that I'd say is, we tend to have in biotech, med device, anything in healthcare, they're complex buying processes. There's usually, a clinician involved. There's often finance, supply chain, operations. You may have IT. Like, there's a bunch of different people involved. And so the other thing that we advise our clients on is think about the problem from each of those perspectives and understand that for any one of those people, there are 10 to 15 micro decisions that have to happen for them to say, yes, I'm willing to invest the money in this. And so thinking about it from sitting in their shoes and thinking about what are the questions they got to ask, how am I going to answer those questions, and focusing on that versus like, look how cool my shiny object is, I think just makes it easier.
So I also have another thought here. When you talk to these various stakeholders and, working in healthcare, what I see a lot is busy, overwhelmed, overworked, burnt out, just busy, very difficult to engage, right?
Yep.
So how do you break through? Not necessarily vis-a-vis competitors, right? They're in the same difficult boat, but how do you break through that this 5 seconds of the lunch break or before, patients come in would be dedicated to your message rather than a cup of coffee and just, a music or anything really?
Yeah, I find that karaoke is a good way to do it. So if you can roll in the office with a machine, it's fantastic.
Okay, that's a good one. And if you don't have the karaoke, then what?
I think you're out of business. No, I mean, all kidding aside, I do love karaoke, and I have a karaoke machine, and it's not the first one that I've owned. So
that is good to know. I'm writing that down.
What's my go-to song? I'll get to that in a bit, but I think
what ChatGPT is going to ask you.
Oh, I know. I'm kind of nervous about that now.
Just you wait. Anyway,
anything hairband. I got some range. So yeah. It's good stuff.
Like 80s hairband.
I go like White Snake. Here I Go Again is a crowd favorite. And then
name another song by White Snake though.
What is it now?
Name one other song by White Snake.
I got nothing. I only know that one. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. We all know that song. So anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, we got you distracted on the
Oh, believe me, that's all I'm thinking about now is like,
karaoke.
let's play karaoke.
Karaoke for
Well,
medicine.
so
Yeah.
I will sort of, I'm going to tie karaoke. Now, I do think that though that I realize you were joking about karaoke, but I do think that to your point, there in the end of the day, the first step in moving somebody, I think we often think that you have to move somebody from cold to sale, and that is not true. You actually are trying to move them from cold to, I've at least met you, and now it's a little bit warmer and whatever. And that is how that's how the sales cycle really works. And I think there's a tendency to sort of jump, 5 steps forward. And to your point, it's like, I got all these questions and you haven't proven to me that what I'm doing is wrong yet, or you haven't figured out my pain point yet. I think that's really important. And that's true no matter what you're trying to sell, I believe. So
absolutely. Yeah. I think I think you have to come in from a lot of different angles, right? So, just from if you think about it, you have to have a strategy around trade shows and conferences. You've got to think about what you're doing from an email standpoint. How are you showing up on LinkedIn? Like there's all these kinds of things. And it's not any one piece that's the silver bullet. It's more about the frequency of touch with relevant information. And I think, any professional, again, like I'm talking in the B2B world, like any professional is in general going to try to be improving his or her craft. And so if we think about if we spend a genuine amount of time thinking about, hey, how do I make Elena's life better?
Right.
I'm trying to sell her something, or I have a product that I think can help her. Like if I'm thinking about that, the answers get really easy in terms of, okay, well, what are the things that she cares about? How do I do it? And then where does it go? And it just sort of flows naturally out of that.
So it's interesting because what it kind of makes me think is that it is very typical to look at marketing in a very transactional way, meaning I sent out communication X, I converted Y. I put out a blog Z, I converted D, right? While in reality, it's a lot more cumulative and it's a lot more amplifying and surrounding, right? And a lot more of a long-term kind of game.
Yeah.
So that we kind of established that, right? But given that, marketing is still on that commercial team, right? Hand in hand with sales. So how do you, at least in your world, justify the long game?
I think the only way you get to the long game is to show impact on the short game, right? If you want to think about it that way. And so, we have clients that have 2-year sales cycles. And so, what are you going to do? I think you have to show directionality in a relatively short period of time. And so what is directionality in our context? It's, hey, we're selling a widget to orthopedic surgeons. Okay, well, as a first step, like if we're just getting started, are they opening? Do we send an emails? Are they opening the emails and clicking on the content? Okay, great, right? And then you kind of see that laddering on top of that. I think a lot of times what we'll find with our clients is you'll start doing things and you do start to get some immediacy of, website traffic goes up, leads start coming in, and it doesn't take a year to get to that. It takes 90 days.
Right.
Right. And most of the time you can get 90 days worth of grace to like, okay, here's what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then after about 90 days, the signal starts to separate from the noise and you get better and better. But it's not like you have to invest for 2 years to start getting that first thing. It's going to be like a build maybe.
Right. I mean, there's definitely, right. You're sort of moving people along, whatever, I guess we call it a funnel. But you're sort of moving people along the funnel and you're sort of saying, I don't need everybody. I don't need everything to land, but also I don't know, not everything's going to land right now. I know, Elena, you've talked about this point in past episodes, but this idea that, you sometimes the impact of what you do today is going to pay off, somewhere in the future, and people will literally go silent. You sent them an email, they don't even react to it. They don't even, maybe they clicked it, you can see they opened it. And then suddenly like 6 months later, they're like, oh, out of the blue. And I think this is sort of your point from the past, Elena, was that, it's hard to measure the true impact of marketing in some ways, because so much of it is, is just, you're sort of dripping on people. You're starting to give them the sense of that here are the things that you should be thinking about. You're creating brand awareness. You're getting on their radar screen, and then suddenly when they have a problem that fits the problem that you solve, now I'm ready to connect and so forth.
We had this isn't exactly marketing, but on the recruiting side, right, we're growing quickly. We're trying to bring in, great talented folks to the organization. So, by the way, if you have an account management experience in marketing agencies, love to talk to you. But I had a guy email me earlier this week, and he said, "Hey, 2 years ago, somebody reached out to me from my organization on LinkedIn to see if I was interested in a role, and I just saw the message. Are you guys hiring?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we are actually." So
that is crazy. That is crazy. But, specific to doctors, I do a lot of work in communication to various medical professionals, and I swear they save their emails.
Oh, yeah.
Because truly, I would forget about it, and all of a sudden email comes with the, tag, "Oh my God, I sent that last March," right? So
yeah.
They do.
The other thing that happens is they don't follow your typical alignment. So like you may send them an email, they may not click on the link, but then they're going to go to the website and they're going to get engaged. And we see that a lot. Like, on the back end of our client CRMs, you'll see like we sent an email to Dr. Smith. She didn't do anything, but then all of a sudden she's showing up as a lead that just happened to come in through the website. And it's like,
yeah, sometimes we also see them just writing to sales or various different, agreed.
Well, I think this goes to a point that I've sort of run into a couple of times recently, of this idea of, sometimes people are like, yeah, the website's not that important, right? But the website is important. It may, and that's where too, but back to the point about, sort of marketing and sales need to work hand in hand. And again, this was that idea of enabling business development is, if you have a terrible website, it's like having like a rundown storefront for your restaurant or something. Like, people are they're going to look at your, I don't know. I feel like after, the last, 10 years of like corporate, training on, cybersecurity or whatever, I don't click the links in any emails pretty much. And so if you send me something I'm interested in, I'm almost immediately going to go over and look at the website and then decide whether this is great. And then I'll connect some other way. I probably won't do it. So to your point, it's like we have this sort of customer journey, sort of mapped out on paper, but it is not necessarily the journey that they are going to actually go through.
And actually, I want to just chime in for a second. In healthcare, I have to say, journeys are not, and by journeys, I mean us, meaning companies communicating B2B, right? Journeys are not nearly as well established as, say, in restaurants, right? Because in a restaurant, Jeff, to your point, the menu and the website and the proposition and the look and the feel and the communication aligns pretty nicely. In healthcare, I don't know what you think, Scott, but I often feel that we still deal with, cats and dogs very often.
Yes. A lot of personalities, right? You got to be able to kind of manage different personalities and different types.
So. And also communication and the state of branding and communication and just things not necessarily lining up as smoothly as in a lot of more consumer-facing industries.
Yeah.
So I have a question that is particularly on my mind, because I've been trying to help a few groups get do lead generation as a side hobby. It's just kind of something I like to do. And
sales.
It's that early part of the conversation. Like, so one of the things that our favorite digital marketer, Hannah Leitner, told me was like, what you should do is you should just connect with people on LinkedIn rather than send them the message through Sales Navigator or whatever, because you're actually going to get a better result. That's exactly what happened when I just connect to people I think are interesting for what I want to do. they connect, say, maybe it's like 40% of the time. On Sales Navigator, I've sent out hundreds and I got like 2 people saying I'm not interested, right? But the problem that I have is actually the next step. Okay, so now I've connected. Now what? Like how do you get in that early stage? Like how do you get the conversation going, as opposed to like maybe you got one touch, but how do you get that? How do you think about converting that into sort of the next stage without being like, hey, here's what I sell. Here's a list of 100 things that I can do for you. Like that's immediately I'm out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I LinkedIn is a very great platform. So here's what I would say. You should approach that. And I agree with Hannah, by the way, like it's about personal relationships. And so the thing that I would say is we've all been to a conference, right? We've all been to the happy hour that happens the first night of the conference. Mm-hmm. And we've all had this experience where you walk up and there's like the high top tables and they have like, beer and wine over here and all that. And you've walked up and you've stood at a high top table with somebody with whom you have no relationship, and you lock eyes and you're like, I have to have a conversation with this person. Maybe you're an extrovert like me and you love it. Maybe you're not and you hate it, but like that's going to happen. You should strike that same tone on LinkedIn. So it's about how do you think cocktail hour at a conference? Like you've got a professional relationship in that you're both in the same field or whatever. And just start a conversation like you would with them if you were face to face. And it's been immensely successful. I mean, immensely successful for me personally and our clients. And like, I swear by the value of LinkedIn, not as a used car salesman, like what's it going to take for you to buy my real world evidence database today? Like that's dumb. What's good is like, what are you working on? And what am I working on? And like, hey, how do we help each other out and that sort of thing in a genuine fashion? It's frankly one of the best marketing tools that you could have.
Is that even true if you offer to put like mud guards on your database?
Well, the mud guards really are the difference between, interest and action. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. Actually, as long as I have like Yosemite Sam on them, I think that you're good. Yeah.
I feel like since I was doing something goofy, Jeff, maybe it's a good time for a ChatGPT question.
Exactly, that's where I was going to go.
I'm ready. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. But
all right, I would be too. I mean, do you want like dumb or like thought provoking?
I'm game. Would you throw whatever at me?
Let's start with dumb and then go to
dumb, and then I can try to sound profound after that. So.
I don't even know what ChatGPT. I mean, I literally, just so you know, I asked ChatGPT what are 10 funny questions to ask a healthcare marketing agency CEO, and one of them was, where'd it go? If you could create a soap opera based on hospital drama, what would you call it?
General Hospital? I mean,
I'm like,
that is so clever. Where did you get that? Where did you come up with these?
It's just, I think ChatGPT is just the collective stupidity of the internet being put into.
I think so. I was like, somebody's drunk asked me to answer that question in real life.
Here's the sort of like, here's the more thought-provoking one. And you can mask names or say I can't answer if you need to. Yeah. But this is, what is the most absurd feedback you've ever received from a client about a marketing campaign, and can you share it?
Oh,
I can share it, but then I'd have to.
Yeah, then I'd have to like
delete. I'd have to erase everybody's minds.
Exactly.
It's like it's not the signal's cutting out here, or whatever. No, well, I mean, I guess I'll say it. I'll sort of take the question, actually turn it into like what is the biggest challenge as you're working with clients in terms of sort of keeping them happy and getting them what they want.
I'll answer that, but I have to tell you, and the first thing that popped into my head was for this like most absurd thing. It's not a client, but we were talking to a prospect, and they're in a fairly niche area of healthcare, but not so niche that like nobody's ever heard of it. Mm-hmm. And we were going through the process, and they were trying to decide if they were going to partner up with us and that sort of thing. And they literally were like, we don't think you understand our space well enough. And I was aghast. I ran innovation for a big hospital system. Like
Right.
we have 50 clients in and around this exact space. And it was the first time I've ever had somebody, I was like genuinely insulted that I'm like,
What?
I got patents on stuff that you guys are working on. Like, what are you talking about? But anyway, I think to answer the question, so anyway, that company, I was like, okay,
that didn't work out.
Didn't work out. But I think the biggest challenge that we fight against is the ability to flip things on and off. Like that's the thing that I don't, and it kind of goes back, Elena, what you were saying before is like, you're going to send stuff out and it builds over time and then it ramps down over time. And it's not as easy as like, I press go and then you're at 100% and then I turn it off and it's 0. And I think just understanding that, just like, marketing is ultimately communications, right? And communications is ultimately what we do all day long. Right. And it's like, you may have a conversation with someone, pops in your head. Oh, Johnny said something about whatever. Like so we've got our basement got some water in it because it's been raining here in St. Louis and whatever. And I happen to remember a YouTube video that I saw years ago about a guy who like got a shop vac and cut a hole in the carpet and put the hose in to like dry the underpad and all that sort of thing. I hadn't thought about that guy for years. But right. I watched the video and I was like, oh, that's how we do it. So I literally downstairs, we have a shop vac blowing air underneath my carpet. And I think that's the nature of communications, which is the nature of marketing. And so just understanding that it's just because we're doing things online doesn't mean it's zeros and ones like a software. It's right. More like you're just influencing human beings. And it's the same thing like if you're face-to-face, you're just doing it via Zoom or an email or whatever.
Right. It has to build. It has to build.
Yep.
So I want to build a little bit on what you were saying, because I actually see a lot of it too, is you are not from my insert tiny little, area of expertise, or have you worked with, not just pediatrician, but the pediatric neurologist and whatnot. So I think there is an appetite in healthcare for trust. And I think this type of questions come out of seeking trust. So outside of having covered every specialty and have worked with every size and every healthcare system, how do you build that trust?
I think first of all, it's about converting agnostics, not atheists. So there are going to be people that will say no, and that's okay. That's just life. And so I think let's take those people off the table. I think for the rest of the folks, what they're looking for is, do you understand my problem? Do you sort of have my best interests at heart? And like, can I trust you? And so I feel like it comes down to authenticity. And again, I feel like we're in an age right now that the pendulum has swung so far that everything is mechanical and digital, and that email click is a click. In reality, it's a human being who's saying, yes, I'm going to take my valuable time and going to engage in whatever you're sending. And so I feel like if we take ourselves out of this like zeros and ones kind of marketing approach, and we think about it more like, how are we creating relationships? These things naturally come out of it. Do I have any experience in pediatric neurology? No. But do I understand the challenges of trying to take care of sick children who are having issues with, brain or neurology in some capacity? Yeah, like I can put myself in those shoes. And I think that on authenticity and that focus on the pediatric neurologist and most importantly, the patient builds trust faster than, yes, I worked for company X that happens to be in the space. It's about being authentic, concerned about their problems, and focused on basically delivering to the patient. It gets easier once you get past that point. And if you don't, by the way, if it's all about the money, get out. I mean, again, like maybe I sound a little harsh, but I'm like, there's too many bad players in here, and this is why it's good if you're a good player. Too many bad players who are just all about the money, and it's unfortunate that healthcare has become this place where people come to like bilk people. Right. And so I feel like the bar is way lower if you're a genuinely interested and curious human being to come in and help people once you get past that first touch.
Yeah.
So we have come up amazingly quickly on
This is fast. Yeah.
It is so fast. Actually, somebody said the other day that, Joe Rogan, we're almost as popular as Joe Rogan.
Roughly. Yeah. What is it? Yeah.
But anyway, like he does 3-hour-long conversations or whatever. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm not saying we should do that, Jeff.
No, on the Friday.
We have come up to the end, and
cocktails involved or karaoke. Like I can game for that if we've got
3 hours. It absolutely would need cocktails involved. Go ahead.
So we like to always go around and have everybody say one thing that that they want to leave the audience with, whether it's a thought or an interesting topic that we've had. We always haze the guest and make them go first, and then I always go last, so I have the most time to think about it. So, Scott, what do you want to leave our audience with?
I want to leave the audience with the idea that marketing and sort of the commercial side of the business is about building relationships of trust and sort of mutual engagement. And I feel like if you take anything away from this, it's that your customers, again, we're talking healthcare, but this is more broadly defined. Your customers or prospects are interested in what you have. You just have to make sure you're describing it in a way that is addressing their problems, not your goals. And I think if you can do that, everything gets easier in terms of being able to see the growth on the scoreboard. So forgive me, I know this is a wrap-up thing, but I wanted to talk just briefly. So I'm a big college football fan. I went to Georgia, right? Go Dogs. And Nick Saban is the legendary coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and he beat us too many times, but I have a tremendous respect for the man. And one of the things that he does that I think ties directly back to marketing is he's about the process. And the process is ultimately, in our case, in a marketing standpoint, about delivering value, creating relationships, and solving people's problems.
Right.
And when you do that and execute on the playbook every play, the scoreboard will show itself to be in your favor. And so I think that to me is the biggest thing, is like, do the things that you need to do, and the score will be reflected well at the end of the game.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Scott, before I jump in, how can people connect with you and reach you?
So welcome to come to our website, jairusmarketing.com, Jairus marketing.com. If you're interested in where the name comes from, just Google Jairus, and then glad to talk to you about why we kind of identify with him. But yeah, so that's a great place. My email is just scott@jairusmarketing.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I pretend to be on Twitter sometimes, but any of those are great. So
Twitter doesn't exist anymore.
I know. I refuse to call it X, but
anyway, for me, I was just going to build on what you were saying, Scott, and just say, I think the really important point in all of this then is, because you're dealing with human beings and because you're building relationships, it has to be a build. You have to recognize that you can't move people from 0 to 60. You have to actually, go through the steps in between. And I think that's, always good to remember. It's easy to get, especially I think in the sort of B2B sales world, it's easy to get sort of lost in your, I got to get the next sale. And it's like, well, the next sale will come, to your point about, the scoreboard. That scoreboard will reflect if you build the relationships over time. But if you try and just, I don't know, I'm not even going to pretend that I know enough sports to do a sports. but anyway, yes. I totally resonate with that, and I will pass it to Elena.
So yes, I very much second that. One thing at a time, one step at a time, right? You solve one small problem and then move to the next one and the next one. And also the complexity of decision makers and the need to understand their individual journeys. And this, again, healthcare is super complex. So these journeys are complex. So it's critical to understand them and just follow communication is relevant, right? To just push specific target just one step on their specific journey. So that's that. I also understood that Scott is looking for an account executive. So in our LinkedIn communication, we will put it down that if there is one, then Scott wants one. So that's awesome.
Right. All right.
Awesome.
Eric, take us
So
out.
I'm going to go with the piece about LinkedIn. So get more detailed, because it's specifically the problem I've been thinking about is that concept I think is really interesting, Scott, about you got to treat it like it's the conversation that you're having in person. Like you don't go up to somebody, you go, "Hi, I'm Eric. Do you want to buy stuff?" Like you gotta ease into, you gotta build that trust that you're even worth talking to. And as far as like the funny thing that I usually try to say, I'm racking my brains here, trying to come up with something goofy to say about General Hospital, and like sort of tune in next time when Jeff says, and but I don't know. I'm like, am I putting you on the spot, Jeff? What are you going to say next time?
Just say what's on your mind.
What's on your mind? Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. It's been great having you, Scott, and look forward to our next episode in 1 week from today.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you.